You walk into an empty house. You flip the light switch. Nothing happens. The power is out. For a second, you don't move. You just listen. No hum from the refrigerator. No traffic outside. No distant television. Nothing. And somehow, that nothing feels louder than any sound you've ever heard. Your heart rate climbs. Your ears strain. Your eyes dart toward the shadows in the corner of the room, even though you know nothing is there. You are, in this moment, more alert than you were 5 minutes ago when the television was blaring and the world felt normal. Why does silence do this to you? Why does the absence of sound feel like the presence of danger? The answer isn't really about sound. It's about what your brain was built to listen for. Go back 200,000 years. Put yourself on the open grassland at dusk with your back against a rock and your groups scattered nearby. In that world, sound was information. A rustle meant something was moving. A snap meant something was close. A distant call meant a predator was hunting, and the silence between calls meant it might be hunting you. Silence, in that environment, almost never meant safety. It meant something had stopped moving. And things that stop moving right before they attack are exactly the things you needed to notice. This is called the orienting response, first mapped out by the Russian psychologist Ivan Sokolov in the 1950s. He found that your nervous system doesn't wait for a loud bang to react. It reacts to change. A shift from noise to silence is a change, and your brain treats every unexplained change as a question that needs an answer right now before you can relax. Sokolov measured this in the body itself. Skin conductance, heart rate, pupil dilation. Every time a sound pattern shifted unexpectedly, the body fired off a small cascade of alertness, whether the person consciously noticed the shift or not. The mind doesn't need to name the change to react to it. It just needs to detect that something is different from a second ago. So when the power goes out and the house goes quiet, you're not imagining a problem. Your ancestors' nervous system, running on your modern hardware, is asking the same question it always asked in the wild. What just stopped? And is it still out there? Think about the last time you were on a phone call and the other person suddenly stopped talking mid-sentence. Not a pause, a dead silence with no explanation. You probably said, "Hello?" Within 2 or 3 seconds, you couldn't help it. An unexplained silence, even a completely harmless one, pulls at something ancient in you that needs to know the connection is still alive. Here's where it gets stranger. Your brain doesn't just get anxious in silence. It starts inventing sound. In 1954, a psychologist named Donald Hebb ran an experiment at McGill University that would later be called one of the most unsettling studies in the history of psychology. He paid college students to do nothing, lie in a quiet, dim room, no tasks, no noise, no stimulation of any kind. Most participants couldn't last more than a few days, and some quit within hours. Why? Because the brain, starved of input, started generating its own. Participants reported hearing footsteps that weren't there, doorbells ringing in empty rooms, music playing faintly, then vanishing. Some began hallucinating shapes and even full scenes. Their nervous system, built for a world of constant sensory information, treated the absence of input as an emergency and started manufacturing signals just to have something to process. Your brain does not like an empty channel. Silence isn't neutral to it. Silence is a vacuum, and vacuums get filled. Hebb wasn't trying to scare anyone. He was trying to understand something practical, originally connected to military research on isolation. But what he found reshaped how psychologists thought about the mind itself. A healthy brain, it turned out, isn't a passive recorder waiting for the world to give it something to process. It is an active predicting machine, constantly generating a model of what should be happening around it. Take away the input, and the model doesn't shut down. It keeps running on guesses, and after a while, those guesses start to feel real. This is why the quietest hour of the night, somewhere between 2 and 4 in the morning, is when so many people report their most vivid anxious thoughts. It's not that the problems are worse at that hour. It's that there's no competing noise to drown them out. The mind, left alone with nothing to listen to, starts listening to itself, and what it finds isn't always calm. You've probably felt a smaller version of this. A silent car ride that turns tense for no clear reason. A pause in conversation that stretches half a second too long and suddenly feels loaded with meaning it never had. Humans are so uncomfortable sitting in unfilled space that entire industries exist just to prevent it. Elevator music, hold music, the ambient hum piped into stores and waiting rooms. Almost none of it is there for you to enjoy. It's there so your nervous system has something, anything, to hold on to instead of manufacturing its own signal. But here's the twist that makes this whole thing more complicated than silence equals danger. Silence also heals you, sometimes faster than anything else can. In 2013, a researcher named Imke Kirste, working out of Duke University, ran a study on mice and different types of sound exposure. She tested white noise, pub calls, classical music, and as a control, silence. She expected silence to do nothing, since it was only meant as a baseline. Instead, silence outperformed every other condition. The mice exposed to 2 hours of true silence each day showed measurable growth of new neurons in the hippocampus, the region of the brain tied to memory and emotional regulation. Not the music, not the sound. The absence of sound. Around the same time, a cardiologist named Luciano Bernardi found something similar in humans. In a 2006 study on music and physiological response, he discovered that the pauses between musical phrases, not the music itself, produced the greatest drops in blood pressure and heart rate. Musicians and non-musicians alike showed the same pattern. The silence between the notes was doing more for the nervous system than the notes ever did. Bernardi's team hadn't set out to study silence at all. They were measuring how different genres of music affected cardiovascular tension, expecting slow music to calm people and fast music to excite them. What actually calmed people most consistently were the gaps, the 2-second stretches where nothing played at all. It was almost an inconvenient result, a footnote that ended up mattering more than the main finding. So which is it? Is silence a threat or is silence medicine? The honest answer is both, and the difference comes down to something your ancestors also understood, even if they never could have named it. It's not the silence itself that matters. It's whether your nervous system believes it's safe enough to stop scanning. In the wild, silence after a long stretch of normal ambient noise, birds, insects, wind, was rarely a good sign, because it usually meant something had scared the background life into freezing. That kind of silence still triggers your orienting response today, the version in the dark house with the dead power. But silence in a context your body has already marked as safe, a quiet room you chose, a meditation session, a walk with no destination, gets processed completely differently. There's no unexplained change to investigate. There's nothing that needs to be found. So the resources your brain would normally spend scanning for threats get freed up for something else entirely: repair. This is likely why chronic noise, the kind most modern humans live inside almost constantly, traffic, notifications, background television, keeps so many nervous systems stuck in a low simmer of vigilance that never fully switches off. It's not that the noise itself is dangerous, it's that a brain built to treat sudden silence as a warning sign rarely gets the actual silence it needs to confirm the warning was false and stand down. You are, in a very real sense, still living with the listening habits of someone who needed to know if the grass had stopped moving. Except now the grass is a notification feed and it never actually stops. There's a reason so many people describe silence itself as something they have to work up to, almost like a skill they've lost. Meditation teachers will tell you that the first 10 minutes of sitting quietly are almost always the hardest, full of fidgeting and half-formed urges to check a phone that isn't even ringing. That discomfort isn't a personal failing. It's an old alarm system, doing exactly what it was built to do, misfiring in a context it was never designed for. Give it a few more minutes and something starts to shift. The scanning slows down. The nervous system, finding nothing to report, finally starts to believe there's nothing to find, which raises an uncomfortable question about the world you've built for yourself. If your nervous system needs real, uninterrupted quiet to file away the day's threats as resolved, and you almost never give it that, how many alarms are still quietly ringing in the background of your mind, waiting for a silence that never comes long enough to turn them off? Consider how differently your ancestors' days were structured. Long stretches of ambient, low-level sound, wind, insects, footsteps, followed by total quiet once the group settled for the night and the fire died down. That nightly quiet wasn't empty time. It was maintenance time, the closest thing the ancient nervous system had to a nightly system reset. Compare that to a typical modern day, filled edge to edge with notification sounds, traffic hum, background podcasts, and screens that glow long after the sun goes down. The reset window has all but disappeared, even though the system that depends on it hasn't changed at all. It's worth asking what you actually do the moment a room goes quiet. Most people reach for a phone within seconds, not because anything urgent is happening, but because the quiet itself feels like it needs to be filled before it fills itself with something less comfortable. Which means the very thing your ancestors depended on to recover, real silence, has quietly become one of the most avoided experiences in modern life. Maybe that's the real reason the quiet house at the start of all this felt so unsettling. It wasn't really about the dark or the dead refrigerator or the shapes in the corner. It was your brain finally getting a moment of true silence, after who knows how long, and not knowing what to do with it. So the next time the power goes out, and the house goes quiet, and your heart starts to climb for no visible reason, remember what's actually happening. That isn't fear arriving out of nowhere. That's 200,000 years of listening finally being asked to answer for itself.